the DNC and DCCC, major organs of the Democratic fundraising efforts, that the Russians initiate. This guy from the Trump campaign seemingly knew about this before it was public knowledge that there was a leak and the Russians have emails that they're going to release. I'll just leave it there. Do you think the FBI should have investigated that?
Assuming that's all correct, what you said, yes.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that, like, the federal government, should not investigate that. Can you imagine, by the way, if this were like evidence that like a Clinton staffer knew about in advance, a Trump campaign email leak? Is there any chance people would be credibly arguing, hey, yeah, the federal government shouldn't be investigating that? Are you surprised I knew this much about the different issues?
I am surprised you knew this much, honestly. Yeah. Like, it seems like you know everything about everything.
Hey, bro.
Hey, folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description.
Yo, what up, Silent Death Monkey?
Oh, hey, how you doing?
Good. What can I do for you?
I just wanted to talk a little Russiagate potentially.
Yeah, hit me.
First of all, I want to say I'm not a MAGA guy. I was following Russiagate at the time, and I thought like the whole thing was just like lawfare and illegitimate.
What do you take to be the whole thing? Can you just explain? Like, what's your take of it?
I didn't think the investigation was legitimate into Trump. I didn't think that they actually thought he colluded with Russia in any kind of illegal way to interfere in the election. I don't have proof of that, but that was like my feeling of it the whole time following it.
I think that your opinion there, one, you admit that you don't have proof of that kind of negative intent, which they're knowingly doing something illegitimate or they're knowingly doing something without evidence. So I think that you're self-admitting that you don't have evidence for your claim. And then number two, it's predicated on some notion of what the investigation was, which was that it was investigating Trump himself for colluding with the Russians, when it wasn't. It was an investigation.
Or his campaign?
It was a counterintelligence investigation into specifically 4 people with ties to the campaign, including Paul Manafort, Carter Page, Michael Flynn, and George Papadopoulos. And you're going to tell me whether or not you think that is justified based on the following. So there's a massive leak of emails after a massive hack of the DNC and DCCC, basically all the Democratic or the major organs of the Democratic fundraising efforts, that the Russians initiate. Australia tells the DOJ, hey, like, this guy from the Trump campaign seemingly knew about this before it was public knowledge that there was a leak and the Russians have emails that they're going to release, and they told it to one of our people. I'll just leave it there. Do you think the FBI should have investigated that?
Let's see. I guess it would depend like how they knew about it. I don't remember them. I thought maybe like Julian Assange like announced something before, and that's how they knew. I could be wrong about that, but
no. So the investigation, Crossfire Hurricane, was initiated after Alexander Downer, who used to be opposition leader in Australia, but basically went to a bar and George Papadopoulos told him, hey, the Russians have dirt on the Democrats on Clintons in emails.
What we report today is that actually it wasn't the basis for the FBI investigation. There were several things that were involved, but primarily it was information from George Papadopoulos. As you said, he was drinking in a bar with the top Australian diplomat in London in May 2016, and 2 months later, the Australian tells the FBI what Papadopoulos had told him, that Russia has dirt on Hillary Clinton.
He didn't think much of it, he noted it, but then not, weeks later, they released this big tranche of shit. And so Papadopoulos told Downer before it was public knowledge, before anyone knew, right, that there was this massive hack and then before this leak even occurred. And so Downer goes to the FBI and says, hey, this guy, like, he seemed to know that the Russians had dirt. Don't you think that should have been investigated? That's how that has been the foundation of the investigation, which has been, properly understood from Mueller from the IG reports, from the Durham investigation, and there's no contradictory information that that's how the investigation started. And my question for you is just simple. Do you think that the FBI should have investigated that?
Assuming that's all correct, what you said, yes.
Yeah. So the start of the investigation, I think it's hard. Even Durham says it, like, he quibbles. It shouldn't have been a full investigation, but it's a stupid little point that he makes there, and I don't even think it's credible. But he does even he acknowledges that it should have been, that there should have been an inquiry opened. The only question is, like, should you have done other, these FISA warrants or whatever? But in any respect, I think it's hard to argue that, like, the federal government, should not investigate that shit. Can you imagine, by the way, if this were like evidence that, like, a Clinton staffer knew about in advance, the Trump campaign email leak? Is there any chance people would be credibly arguing, hey, yeah, the federal government shouldn't be investigating that shit when we, like, get a tip from a friendly government like Australia, like, hey, this guy looks sus. It looks like he has some prior knowledge, and how does he know that the Russians hacked it before it's public knowledge?
Yeah, MAGA would be.
Yes, yeah. So I think it's really hard to argue that you shouldn't initiate an investigation based on that. That's, like, wild.
Yeah. So, assuming what you're saying is accurate, that George Papadopoulos had, like, foreknowledge,
Yeah.
and, like, no one else knew that at the time, like, I'd say that's a solid reason.
If you go to
do we know?
Yeah.
Sorry, do we know, like, how he knew at this point? Was that ever found out?
How Papadopoulos knew?
Yeah.
So there was a professor from Malta named Joseph Mifsud, apparently, who the U.S. government has alleged has connections to Russia. He's been missing now for years.
Do you still stand by that article because it alleges that Joseph Mifsud was a Russian agent?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the Intelligence Committee found that he was representing Russian interests in communicating with Papadopoulos.
But that's someone who George Papadopoulos went to, Joseph Mifsud, this guy who is a professor who we don't know where he is anymore. Maybe he's been killed or whatever. But who our government alleged
I have,
Russia.
like, I have memories of this guy, Mifsud. I followed it, like, closely a long time. But, like, was he involved in, like, another, like, some kind of operation, like, a long time ago under a different presidency that was controversial?
Not that I'm aware of. This is mostly what he's most known for. This shit. I'm not aware of his involvement in another investigation.
And I know, like, in MAGA world, Joseph Mifsud is, like, a very suspicious character, and, like, how he is involved in this is suspicious. But I don't remember the details really.
Yeah, I think that there are people who think that Joseph Mifsud was, like, a plant from the Democrats or something.
What? Who was tasking Western intelligence to spy and set Flynn up? Was it Clapper? Was it Brennan? Was it Obama? And if federal prosecutors have examined these phones, oh, you can damn well bet that John Durham and A.G. Barr have seen them too. Now, Mifsud, he's been painted as this Russian asset that was just willing to hand the Trump campaign these Hillary Clinton emails. But his ties to Russia are extraordinarily weak. His ties to the intelligence on the well, let's just say they're weird as hell.
But it doesn't really make much sense that the Democrats would, like, what, self-leak and do this and, like, release a bunch of embarrassing shit and plant this professor who the government also alleges has ties to the, like, and why would they need to even do this if they could just control the intelligence agencies, right? So, like, it doesn't make sense because the intelligence agencies, or at least the FBI, was fucking with Clinton in terms of the email investigation anyway. And so presumably if they had, like, ultimate control over the FBI, they would just, like, force the FBI to do whatever they want, but they didn't because they don't. And the Democrats didn't have control of the FBI. And it's such an elaborate plot that would be required and so risky, just, like, I don't know, plant a professor to fuck with Papadopoulos, to get Papadopoulos to drunkenly say to someone in an Australian bar one day that they could have counted on that guy being at the bar, Papadopoulos going to the bar, him saying something on purpose. Like, this entire thing is a fucking, it just doesn't make sense. The official story is what's believable, but the notion that this Mifsud guy was planted by the Democrats, I think, is so implausible, and no evidence of it has emerged, and they've investigated very heavily heavily, Clinton and everyone else, and they're currently in charge of the government. They have these conspirators, Kash Patel, etc., and they're actively looking at this shit. So you think if they would have the goods, they would release them, but they don't, because it doesn't exist.
All right, so there's more, other than this. I guess perhaps like the basis of the investigation maybe was legitimate.
Okay.
There are certain things I remember I felt like were like not legitimate, like how they obtained the FISA warrant. If I remember correctly.
The FISA warrants, I think, the big problem there is the failure to disclose certain things to the FISA court. And I think it's without the inclusion of some of this information to the FISA court, where they don't disclose, they disclose like that it comes from a political opposition research at some point during their renewal applications, but they might not have included it in the first ones. And that's important information for probable cause purposes against Carter Page. But I think that was bad, and they shouldn't have done that. And there was even some criminal misconduct by someone later on in the line who changed and doctored an email at some point. But none of that establishes that they were out to get Trump. It really doesn't, because Carter Page wasn't associated with the campaign at the time. He was a water boy, not super important. And Trump himself was not under investigation. They were investigating these separate people as a counterintelligence matter. And I think that there are problems with the FISA warrants. And the reason we know that is because we have IG reports that say what the problems with the FISA warrants were, but they just don't establish, like, if this is your effort to quote unquote get Trump, it's a shitty effort. Like, why would you do that and not a million other things to like fuck with Trump? And I think that there's no evidence that political animus played a role in what's happening here. It's not enough, and that's Durham's finding, and that's also the IG's finding. And so,
did you find any evidence that political bias or other improper consideration affected the FBI's decision to open the investigation into George Papadopoulos?
No, we don't.
The Inspector General's report uncovered no evidence political bias inspired or influenced the Russia investigation. It said the investigation was lawful, something the president has questioned for years.
You detail how FBI personnel working on FISA applications violated protocols. They were cavalier at best, as you said in your own words, towards accuracy and completeness. Senior FBI personnel displayed a serious lack of analytical rigor towards information that they received, especially information received from politically affiliated persons or entities. And you said, quote, a significant reliance on investigative leads provided or funded by Trump's political opponents were relied upon here. Among the most alarming things that you referred to in the report is the impact of confirmation bias. And you said in your report at page 303, that's defined as, or it stands for, the general proposition that there is a common human tendency, mostly unintentional, for people to accept information and evidence that is consistent with what they believe to be true. But sir, here, this wasn't innocent, unintentional human tendency, was it? It was overt political bias, was it not? Peter Strzok, for example.
There are some individuals who clearly expressed a personal bias. It's difficult to get into somebody else's head to see whether they knew it.
Unless we have the...
But the bottom line here is it's a rather remarkable 300-page report. John Durham does not even go as far as he did back in 2019 when the Justice Department Inspector General released its own report and said the FBI was justified in opening this investigation and there was no political bias. Back then, Durham issued a statement saying he disagreed with that. In this report, he doesn't even go so far as to say the FBI acted wrongly by opening this investigation. He accuses the FBI of slipshod work, essentially, and being too gullible and accepting information that was politically tainted, including the infamous Steele dossier. But really, for an investigation that has been billed by Donald Trump and others as, uncovering the crime of the century, he finds no conspiracy, no corruption, not even actions by the FBI that can be attributed to political bias. Essentially, this was like a performance audit of the FBI, and the FBI's position is, thank you very much, we've already made a number of changes.
I don't think there's a good reason to think that they were motivated to harm Trump. If they were motivated to harm Trump, why wouldn't they release damaging information before the election? And so I just think it doesn't hold water. Yes, there are problems, even illegality, and aspects about how the investigation was run. But I don't think that establishes that it was done politically, or that it and
Right.
Trump himself wasn't even like a target of the investigation until after he fired Comey, and that's for obstruction. So I just think that all in all, the evidence is weak that there's political motivations to this case.
I don't know, like I could argue like it's suspicious. So I think the guy who like doctored the email was it James Baker?
No, that's general counsel.
Oh. Who was it? I don't
so
remember.
it's this guy, Kevin Clinesmith. That's the guy.
Okay, yeah. So like I would be like, obviously there's no evidence of this, but like I would be suspicious. Like, did he do this on his own, or like did it come from like higher up? Like obviously he, might not throw whoever's in charge like under the bus, but like you can see how like MAGA would be like very suspicious of this.
Yeah, there's no evidence that anyone else was involved. And remember, Clinesmith, the only reason that he's even like found out altering this email is because someone who was above him was asking him questions, right? So like the only reason he even has to doctor this email is because someone within the department was like pressing him on it, right? So how does it make sense that Clinesmith is part of a grand conspiracy from the top down if the only reason he's even doctoring this email is in response to people who are senior to him trying to cross their T's and dot their I's and do everything by the book? It just like, there's a lot of like weird shit that is entailed if you take that view. Like if you take the view that it's a top-down conspiracy, like why do this kind of shit? It just doesn't make much sense. Or okay, maybe some people are in it, but not everybody. So, but to me, it just doesn't indicate that the orders to doctor an email came from the top down, and the awareness that because the email pertains to whether he was ever a source for another government agency. The basis for that was known to this other government organization, which is suspected to be the CIA. And so it just seems like, okay, so the CIA is not on board because the CIA so this whole thing, I think, falls apart when you start to say that it's a conspiracy among the top echelons of these different organizations. If it was a effort in that respect, if it's an effort in that respect, I think that you would expect the CIA to like not reveal to Kevin Clinesmith and to the rest of the FBI team that he was a informant. But they didn't, right? Okay. So all of these problems almost like certainly would not have existed but for the actions of the superiors in the first place. And it just looks like regular bureaucratic shit and then some misconduct and illegality by, some, basically just this one person, Kevin Clinesmith. But it doesn't seem to go any further than that.
Okay, how about they applied for the FISA warrant and it was denied, and then immediately
No, that's wrong. That's wrong. Just give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay. So they didn't actually ever apply for a FISA warrant, which was rejected.
Okay.
They just the process to get a FISA warrant is very it's very involved, and so there are multiple levels of sign off that have to occur. So there's specific lawyers who deal with these requests from the Department of Justice. Usually it has to have some deputy level person or the top person sign off on the warrant application. And so they didn't apply before the Steele dossier because internally they felt it wasn't robust enough. They wanted something more before they were willing to seek those out. And so they waited, and then eventually they got the dossier, which is additional information. And so they never applied pre-dossier, so they don't have a standard to compare.
Okay. So would you say like the fact that they like relied on the Steele dossier to get the FISA warrant, at least partly, was like an error, or?
No. I think the failure to disclose stuff to the FISA court is an error. But think about it like this, right? Like, the standard is probable cause. That's like what you get for a warrant. And imagine that you're like a normal police officer who's seeking a warrant from a judge. Do you need to know 100% sure? Like, let's say you get a tip from someone that you know is pretty reliable. Like, the neighbor. This neighbor has given you tips before, and they say, hey, I think I see something over there in that building, blah, 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 blah. And it's, not every aspect of the subsource is verified. Not everything is 100%, but that doesn't mean you don't reach the threshold of probable cause, which is something like 30 to 40%, And so it's a low bar to get over the hump there. And it's a little different than a normal criminal warrant in that it's a warrant alleging that you're a foreign asset, essentially. So it's a little different in that respect. And there are internal checks that kind of make it a little more stringent than a normal criminal warrant. But I don't think that it's a problem to use opposition research to get a FISA warrant. The problem was not the full disclosures of the political nature of how it was sought, and the fact that Carter Page was a former informant for the CIA at some point previously. Those failure to disclose, I think, made it were highly problematic and probably made the warrants illegal. But I don't think that there's evidence that it shows a political. Some kind of political motive here. That's what I'm not seeing.
Okay. So I know Carter Page, at the time they got the warrant, he was no longer with the campaign, and maybe he was not a very important figure in the campaign. What do you think about the 3-hop rule, where they could have just read everything in his email archive, for example?
Well, it's just people use this 2-hop rule shit because they see Rob Noor post about it, or they see John Solomon or whatever post about it. I think it's a total misunderstanding. So that 2-hop rule is applicable to some of the NSA bulk surveillance methods where they get a bunch of metadata. And not the content of emails and shit. But a warrant, right? Like a FISA warrant just lets you get all of that person's communications.
Okay, so ignore the hops then.
Yeah, the hops. You could
past
get
emails.
Yeah, you get all of Carter Page's emails. You get all of Carter Page's communications because you have a warrant against Carter Page. What do I think of it? I think it's tailored to the warrant. The warrant is that the reason why the FISA warrant is a little more dangerous is because it's a little bit more all-encompassing. Because you're just basically saying that you're a foreign asset. Do I have a problem with that? I have a problem that the warrant was defective, but it's the nature of the warrant is one in which those communications are accessible, and I don't, because I think that there was no political motivation in obtaining the warrant. I don't think that there's anything inherently problematic with the warrant applying as such. I think the problem starts and ends with the substantive issues in the FISA warrant application and renewal process, at least as concerns sort of this episode in time. So that's my problem. And I think that if you were to take those issues away, then the wide sweeping nature of the warrant would also go away. And so it's all part of the same shit. Yeah. It's all the same original sin, so to speak. But as it happens, I think that there's additional evidence to make us not as fearful. One is that we know that Trump doesn't use email. And another one is that we know that Carter Page was a minor figure. Even the Trump campaign itself was disassociating with Carter Page publicly, saying he was no big deal. They lied and said that he wasn't affiliated with the campaign at all ever. So that was a lie from the Trump campaign. So they were downplaying him because he was not a big figure in the campaign, and people upplay but he wasn't having all this FaceTime with Trump. If you read some of the communications, he was trying to play up his importance, as was Papadopoulos. But these people, they were water boys, and so I don't really think there's much fear here.
What do you think about evidence that it was Russia who hacked the DNC? Is this relying on an intelligence assessment? Because as far as I know, we do just kind of have to trust.
No, it's so strong, man. It's so strong that that it was Russia. One is the Russians have all but admitted it. At least with putting aside the DNC hacks just for a second, Prigozhin admits that they were the Internet Research Agency and they were in charge of a lot of that shit.
I do want to ask you about this comment by Prigozhin, this Russian oligarch linked to Putin, right? Who appeared to admit, maybe he was joking, I don't know, the Russian interference in U.S. elections. He told Telegram, quote, "Gentlemen, we interfered, we interfere, and we will interfere."
when it comes to the hacking effort, there is strong independent evidence that it was the Russians, and even the Trump administration now admits it was the Russians. So I just want to be clear about that. Tulsi Gabbard admits that the Russians hacked the DNC. Her latest bullshit is only that they haven't established that the purpose was to help Trump. But now even the official Trump narrative is that is the Russians hacked the DNC. And it's in fact entailed by a lot of their statements. Their statements are Russia hacked the DNC and they kept all of this other information which they didn't leak. And that shows they weren't trying to help Trump.
Essentially, the documents that Russia claimed they had portrayed Hillary Clinton as having mental health challenges that would result in fits of laughter and fits of rage. It also pointed out some very specific physical health concerns that apparently leaders within the DNC were discussing amongst each other.
That's right. This wasn't invented intelligence like the Steele dossier. This was supposedly emails
emails and communication among senior DNC officials that Russia claimed to have in their possession. So the point here is that if Putin and Russia aspired to help Trump get elected, which is what the manufactured January 2017 intelligence community assessment says with high confidence, according to Brennan and Clapper, then Putin would have released the most damaging information and emails to help President Trump leading up to that November 2016 election. The fact is, the opposite is true. It was intentionally withheld and not released because they assumed that Hillary Clinton would win that election. And their plan, according to these documents that were found in an investigation the House Intelligence Committee conducted into the CIA's creation of this January 2017 assessment, is that Russia had decided to wait until Hillary Clinton won the election and wait until maybe days or weeks before her inauguration to release these documents once again to sow chaos and discord in America.
That's a debunked narrative that I can easily debunk, by the way, if you want to get into that as well. But now everyone kind of accepts, even the Trump administration term 2, that Russia hacked the DNC. So you don't just need to rely on the then existing intelligence reports. The modus operandi is very much Russia, and the Guccifer 2.0 entity that has been linked to Russia. The WikiLeaks itself, known communications with Russians, and this is all established. I mean, it would.
Do you think Julian Assange is in the tank for Russia?
I think he was receiving information from the Russians for sure. I don't even think he would deny it at this point.
Well, I don't know. It was like very strange where he made that Seth Rich comment, isn't it?
What do you mean it's strange?
Like he like implied it was Seth Rich at one point, which was very strange. Like, I don't know why he would.
Because he's a liar and he's he's a piece of shit.
Okay, I mean that might be the case.
Yeah. So at this point, do you agree? Let's just take stock. Do you agree that it's most likely that Russia hacked the DNC, given the fact that not even the Trump administration denies that at this point? Okay. So I don't want to hear anymore people say it wasn't Russia that hacked the DNC. The fact that, WikiLeaks would push Seth Rich, of course he would, because he absolutely was getting information from the Russians and he understood there were legal implications potentially. And so that's Assange. Assange is a bad guy, not a good person.
I'm wondering, like, did you like brush up on this recently by any chance? Like, how do you remember all this stuff so?
Because I follow up. I know the sources and shit, man. I do these debates with Rob Noor, and the reason why he doesn't like to debate me anymore is because I know this shit.
I mean, you clearly do.
Yeah, man.
Impressed. I'm trying to think of. Okay, why do you think the investigation lasted so long?
The Russia investigation?
Yeah.
Didn't last that long. I mean, the investigation, Durham's investigation of the investigation lasted longer. The investigation started in 2016. Mueller was done, in 2019? And the reason it extended so long was because, one, the administration kept, obstructing a lot of information streams. they broadened the scope of it because Trump fired Comey, and so it included an obstruction investigation as well. But the total investigation, I think Mueller comes out with his results in 2019. Crossfire Hurricane starts in 2016, so that looks like 3 years. And Durham spent longer than that. So I don't think that a 3-year investigation is that long.
Would you agree that the media was very irresponsible in their Russiagate coverage?
Depends who. Some people probably, but I think that's been grossly
mainstream
exaggerated.
left-wing media. It was just like front page news almost every day, and it was just over the top.
I think that's because, so yes and no. I think there are some people who let their imaginations get the better of them, but I think that this has been exaggerated by conservatives, and I think that part of this causality relates to Trump and his reaction. So yeah, I mean, if you just let the investigations run their course and cooperate fully, I don't think it would be as much of a something burger. He really just let everything disintegrate when he fired Comey. By getting involved with Comey, he made himself look super fucking guilty. I think he was guilty of obstruction, frankly, in many different spots. And so, yeah, I mean, he is more responsible than anyone. He appoints all of these people who have weird ties to Russia and weird contacts with Russia, including Manafort, who lobbied for the Russian-aligned Party of Regions in Ukraine, appointing Michael Flynn, who lied about his communications with the Russians as incoming national security advisor. He talks nice about Russia and Putin and stuff. So, yeah, I think that there are some people who maybe went too far, but Trump didn't do himself any favors. And I don't really give a fuck. I expect media to distort and lie and shit, or to be whatever about it. And people will misconstrue media responsibility as though we have ever had this standard for totally impartial. This shit doesn't exist. And right now we're seeing all sorts of media distortions, and in terms of emphasis, what they decide to cover, what they don't decide to cover. Everyone will fucking nitpick about what's important, what's not important. What I'm interested in are can you point to specific instances of knowing deceit? That's what I think I care about the most. And I think a lot of the Russiagate hysteria has been greatly exaggerated. And I call it the Russia hoax. The notion that the Russia hoax is itself a hoax is a hoax. Sorry, the Russiagate.
Yeah, I mean,
the Russiagate.
Maybe it was.
The notion that Russiagate is a hoax is, I think, itself a hoax. That's what I mean.
At the time, I was a Bernie bro in 2015. I was so mad at the DNC for kneecapping Bernie Sanders and the mainstream media, and maybe I was just looking at it through that lens, and it influenced my perception of Russiagate. In the wrong direction.
I think that we should take a nuanced approach of it. I think that the Russia investigation, you can make the following conclusions: that there was a lot of, I think, inappropriate contacts between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, where the Trump campaign seemed eager to receive help from the Russians. Now, does it relate to a conspiracy? It's not been established, and so no, I wouldn't say that the evidence shows that there was a conspiracy within the Russian government and the Trump campaign. But they were sending election data to Clinesmith, who was a known Russian asset that was from either Paul Manafort or Roger Stone. One of them, I think, was sending, or either Roger Stone was communicating to Guccifer 2.0, and you had Paul Manafort communicating with Konstantin Clinesmith, who is a Russian asset, giving polling information. So that was there. And then obviously the Trump Tower meeting where, Trump surrogates, including Trump's son, was open and willing to accept help from the Russians. That all, at least bare minimum, I would say inappropriate connections with Russia, willingness and eagerness to help Russia in their pursuits there. I'm not saying that it's illegal or whatever. So I think that's one thing that the Russia investigation establishes. Most importantly, the Russia investigation establishes that Russia interfered in the election in a systematic and overwhelming fashion. I think that that's really important as well. I think that you can say that the Russia investigation was based in beginning and that there was absolutely a great reason to start that investigation. I think the FISA warrant episode looks bad because it was bad. They shouldn't have, not disclosed shit to the FISA courts, and Kevin Clinesmith shouldn't have lied or / altered that email. But I don't think any of either the Durham report, IG Horowitz report establishes that political bias played a role in what's going on here, especially given all the opportunities, the myriad opportunities that the DOJ could have trivially deployed to fuck with Trump even more during the election, including by announcing their shit in the first place, which they weren't. And they didn't give that courtesy to Hillary Clinton when it came to the email investigation. So I think, and you can say whatever you want to say about the media. I don't really have a super strong position there, other than to say I think that there's a lot of like conflation between the media and the government. And if we really had this like overarching grand control that they imply the Democrats have over the DOJ and the media, I think you would have expected to see a lot different things. I think Trump in many ways was treated with far too lightly a hand, and including by Mueller, who decided not to come to a charging decision on obstruction when I think he clearly should have. Anyway, that's my overall take.
Okay. I want to bring it back earlier to the Clinton email thing, because like maybe I'm stupid on this too, but I remember thinking at the time that she was like definitely like guilty of like at least like negligence, but like maybe more. Like she had her private server, like what was it, in like a closet in her bathroom or something. She was running the State Department on that, right?
Yeah. So when she was the Secretary of State, she had multiple private email servers over time. There was one in her home. Eventually, she had one at a place with an organization called Platte River Networks. And so there were multiple servers at issue here. There's no evidence that she was aware that classified information was retained on those servers. I don't think there's any good evidence of that whatsoever. And
wasn't she like exclusively using her like personal email instead of her Secretary of State email?
It depends. No, because there were closed systems that she was using. She had her at Hillary Clinton email server account that she was using for a lot of State Department business, which there was a separate report, an investigation by the State Department that found that it was problematic. I don't know if they specifically found that it was against the rules. There was some, prior history of certain secretaries of state using email, but it was kind of a novel. There's not a great deal of history pre 2008-9, right, when email was available as the standard, right? So it's whether or not it violated the State Department rules and whether or not it's problematic. I think it is problematic given the retention requirements under FOIA, et cetera, right? So I'm glad that there was an investigation. Note also that it was an investigation that was initiated by the Obama administration into an ally of the administration, Hillary Clinton. So she was using private email servers for government work and commingling her private devices and her private network with her government operations. But the evidence seems to be it was done for convenience. And there's no evidence that really she knew that they had classified information on those servers.
Okay, so it ended up that there was some like secret information in some like SAP programs, which my understanding was like that's like a really big deal.
There was some top secret information. There was I think 3 emails with the classification marking C embedded in the actual email text. But the standard here is when it comes to the classified documents, criminal statutes, it needs to be knowing. When it comes to the national defense information statutes, it usually has to be willful and knowing. There is a subsection for gross recklessness, but gross recklessness under the statute, under the precedent of the Department of Justice in charging, is meant to apply a level of criminal recklessness that is associated with like, really prominent classified document markers, gross conduct that is just like so beyond the pale. People who are trying to have like a ill motive for the government or who are trying to betray the government in some way. And so the gross recklessness statute, as understood and construed by courts and as applied by the department in the past, doesn't really seem to apply to these kinds of instances. And the proof is in the pudding, really. When you look at what happened with like Petraeus who was charged. Someone from the Clinton administration was charged. Someone from the Bush administration was charged. It doesn't meet the same of what Clinton did here. Clinton really didn't seem malicious, as the law would define there. So, yeah.
What do you think of, after she got a subpoena to preserve the emails, she had a bunch of them deleted and then say, oh, well, these were supposed to be deleted. Because that doesn't sound like it's legal to me.
Yeah, there's just no evidence that Hillary Clinton was involved in the deletion by Paul Gambetta of the emails on Platte River Networks. So Paul Gambetta is the employee of Platte River Networks.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that Clinton authorized that shit. I mean, the congressional subpoena happened, I think, sometime in March, and the Clinton team had already sort of given orders in the previous year to have a new deletion schedule that Paul Gambetta didn't comply with. And there's just no good evidence that Hillary Clinton authorized the deletion of emails after the subpoena was issued. And,
should anyone have gotten in trouble?
I think it's Paul Gambetta. Perhaps they should have charged him, but they gave him Queen of the Day immunity because nobody wanted to charge some no-name guy for basically he got scared and deleted it, and knowing that he knew that there was a subpoena, and he got a preservation notice from one of the lawyers or some shit, and he got scared and realized he should have deleted all that shit according to the previous deletion policy that they had given to him that he had not followed. And basically, because they didn't have confirmatory proof that it was him, he admitted to it after he was given immunity. But there's just no evidence that goes beyond him. And so I guess you could hit him with a charge, but they felt that the target was Clinton or people higher up, and that this was some water boy. And so they made that decision. It doesn't seem like an insane decision to me, and so I don't really give a fuck.
The only thing I don't like about that is, if you're Hillary, you can just tell him in person, just leave no paper trail, just be like, oh, just do this, say it's for this reason, there won't be a paper trail to me, they'll be fine. And anyone could get away with just deleting subpoenaed information by doing it.
It doesn't really make much sense though, because for a couple of reasons. The first is because Hillary Clinton is not meeting with this dude Paul Gambetta. He doesn't know who the fuck this person is. And she's an important person, right? She's not up to date. She has her people keeping track of that shit. So number one, there's there's no good evidence that they ever met.
Yeah, I mean, she could have her people tell him, they could say, sure, what's up, Miss Clinton,
But to what end, right? The tranche of documents they had already given back to Congress and to the State Department contained classified materials on them. And so you would have to, what is the case, right? If she's giving over materials actively, right? She's actively offering materials to the government that contain classified and even top secret information on it. Why would she do that at all and hide this other tranche that also is if she's already giving away the stuff that is the nuclear stuff, right? The shit that you're not supposed to touch, which is the classified shit. And so this notion presupposes that they're reviewing this other tranche of documents and selectively deciding, hey, we're going to give over the classified some amount of classified shit and keep some other amount of classified shit in the email server, and then we're going to delete them after we give you an order before the subpoena to delete stuff on a 30-day rolling basis, and we're going to wait for you not to follow that, and we're going to expect you not to follow that, and then we're going to actively do this whole farce of sending a fucking deletion or retention email, and then he's given immunity, and so why wouldn't he flip? Once he's given immunity, it was Queen of the Day immunity, and this is not total immunity, it's just immunity for the specific thing. At that point, the incentive is just to flip. Why wouldn't you flip?
Yeah.
It just doesn't. There's just not a good case to give why she would fucking do this. Why go through all this effort and still hand over a bunch of classified stuff that expose her to criminal liability, and then at the same time, it's not clear to me that having those materials available and handing them over to the House when asked would expose her to any more criminal liability than she was already facing. by giving over classified information in the first place. So no, I just don't think there's a good case to make that she knowingly lied, that Paul Gambetta lied after being given immunity, that Uma Abedin lied, that her other attorney who was involved in the case, who I forget her name at this moment as I sit here. So yeah, I think that the case isn't strong that she was involved in the deletion. There's no good case. Even Rob Moore admits it as much. He just thinks that they should have charged Paul Gambetta anyway to try to get that information of Hillary Clinton. But no, I don't think there's any good case of that. And just saying, well, it's possible they spoke about it. Okay, it's possible they didn't. The burden of proof is on the people alleging the crime. So if you're saying like, okay, there's a way they could have done it such that they wouldn't have received or left behind any traces of evidence, okay, it's possible in both worlds, in which they did confer illegally and in a way that would evade detection, and that they didn't, and the burden of proof is on the prosecutor. So you can't just say it's possible. You have to say that there's a reason to believe it.
Yeah. All right, well, I think.
Are you surprised I knew this much about the different issues?
I am surprised you knew this much, honestly. Yeah. It seems like you know everything about everything.
Hey, bro. I mean, I look into these investigations. I like to talk about them because this is like the core of what I think is the MAGA mythology.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's a lot of work to do all that source material reading, which no one does. So you're the only person I've ever talked to who actually knew everything about it. And,
hey, bro.
Yeah, you did a good job.
Hey, man. Appreciate you.